Hey everybody, welcome back to class. So, we got a lot of stuff to cover today. So, we're going to talk about more of the escalation and expansion that the Nazis are going to carry out roughly late 1939 to about 1941-ish is roughly the time frame we're covering today. So, we have four main learning objectives. We're going to analyze the impact of the T4 program on the disabled in Germany. We're going to talk about that in section 1. We're going to analyze the expansion of Nazi and Soviet controlled territories. That'll be in section 2. And we'll identify prisoners sent to the camps, how they were organized, and what they experienced in section 3. And overall, across all three sections, we will analyze primary sources to develop a stronger connection to the past. We'll also do a couple of activities and a final assessment on the way. So, here's our opening activity for today. Very similar to what we did last time. You're going to respond to the following question on Google Classroom. What was the invasion and occupation of Poland like in 1939 and 1940? Provide specific examples from last class in your response. If it helps, use your notes while you're writing this. You have plenty of examples that you can pull from there or the activities that we did last time. You must write a minimum of 3 sentences in order to receive full credit on this opening activity. I will also be grading for basic grammar, so please try and spell things correctly. So, our first lecture is on the disabled. Following the invasion of Poland in 1939, Hitler and the Nazis are going to turn to focus on the disabled populations in Germany and ramp up what they were doing in terms of targeting them, like what we've talked about in previous class periods. So the floodgates are now open following the invasion of Poland. There's an intensification of violence and expansion. There's the euthanasia program is primarily what we're going to talk about in this first section. We'll talk about the expansion into Europe and the repercussions of that in sections 2 and 3, respectively. So please remember, the killing of disabled people predates the Nazis and is not limited to Germany. However, it did gain force under Nazi power. We have the children's program that we talked about in week 2, being led by Dr. Karl Brandt and Philip Buhler to target disabled children and euthanize them. 332 children were killed. Hitler is going to deem this as a success and is going to want a program established for adults. So that is where Dr. Leonardo Conti comes into play. He's a leader in medicine in Germany, working for, he's the head of the Association of Medical Doctors in Germany. So, he's the top doctor in Germany, as well as the state secretary responsible for public health in the Interior Ministry. So, he holds a pretty big position of power. And the targets here are adults in hospitals with mental or other disabilities. Please remember, when we're talking about those targeted that had disabilities, it's a wide range of things from schizophrenia to autism to alcoholism and epilepsy. Now, it is codenamed T4 for the address of their headquarters, with the killings officially starting in October 1939. Again, we already have a program in place that is doing this to children. This is now a program in place doing this for adults. So Conti prepared a form for all doctors and psychiatric institutions to complete, and it involved very few questions like, how often are they visited? Do they have any non-Aryan blood? Are they Jewish? Are they Romani? Are they any other group that we consider to be racially lower than us? Now, these doctors would then review these forms, and if they put a red plus sign, it meant that they would kill the person. If it was a blue minus sign, those people were allowed to live. Now, obviously, some doctors did refuse to participate, but they are simply replaced with more compliant doctors. It's also important to note that this is going to result in experimentation. They use a variety of killing methods. They're going to use injections and poison in the early months, with the first successful mass gassing in January of 1940. The big thing to remember with this is they're going to have some trial and error. They're going to experiment, see what is the most effective way to kill somebody, which is really dark to consider from our perspective in 2025. It's we know it's bad. They're doing something bad, yet they're experimenting to find the most efficient way to do it. It's really messed up. Here's a quote from an anonymous person who worked in the T4 program. Please consider the following while I read the quote. What is this person describing, and what is his tone? Through it, I saw 40 to 45 men who were pressed together in the next room and were now slowly dying. Some lay on the ground, others had slumped down. Many had their mouths open as if they could not get any more air. The form of death was so painful that one cannot talk of a humane killing, especially since many of the dead men may have had moments of clarity. I watched the process for about 2 to 3 minutes and then left because I could no longer bear to look, and felt sick. So take a minute, talk with your table partners, discuss this, and be prepared to report back to the class. We'll do a big class discussion in a moment. So, other programs that are going to take place that fall under the T4 umbrella in Poland result in shooting patients in asylums and hospitals. By November of 1939, that results in 4,000 people being dead. Remember, the Nazi invasion was September 1st, 1939. This is 2 months later. There's also Kaiser's Coffee. These are specially designed vans ran by the SS, who are primarily in charge of this in Poland, that are designed to pump the exhaust of the vehicle into the back of the vehicle, meaning it fed carbon monoxide and those people asphyxiated. Now, they're going to kill hundreds by December 1939 and January 1940. It's also clear to note that the T4 program is not motivated by racial purity, but it does reveal the contagion of violence. Things are simply going to get more and more violent the further into World War II as we go. By 1939, it was obvious that murder was an obvious solution to all their problems. You wanted to get rid of somebody? Murder them, which is really dark to consider. Then, so here's the thing. These doctors that were involved in this were like, we don't have any coverage if anybody tries to go after us legally. So they ask Hitler for formal approval in October 1939. He does give it once he's pressured enough, but he backdates the approval to September 1st, 1939, the day of the Nazi invasion of Poland, believing that it would reduce the scrutiny because of the upheaval of wartime. Now, this approval was meant to protect them from anybody that objected or came after them. It was also meant to try and keep the program a secret. It fails massively. They failed to keep it under wraps. Errors were made on paperwork. For example, some people's death certificates said they died of appendicitis, yet they'd had their appendixes removed 10 years prior. And disabled people also began to figure out what was going on and began to plead for their lives. News also circulated in the communities around the killing centers. Death has a particular smell, and when local hospitals' crematoriums are running day and night, it's got a smell, and people start to smell it and know it. So people start to protest. It upset many Germans. It is important to note that while we work under this misconception that everybody in Germany was on board with what Hitler and the Nazis were doing, that's not the case. Many were actually very much against what Hitler was doing. This is primarily going to be seen in the churches. They run the asylums. Now, that being said, many did still cooperate with the Nazis. But the strongest protests did come from the church, including from Pope Pius XII, that guy we talked about last time, who did nothing to stop the invasion and violence in Poland. He issued a statement condemning the killing of an innocent person because of a mental or physical defect. It's important to note, by the summer of 1941, 70 to 80,000 disabled people had been killed in Germany alone. So, in the summer of 1941, Cardinal August Count von Galen, this gentleman pictured here, is going to give a relatively passionate sermon, calling out the Nazis for what they were doing, and pose the question, whose life would be safe in such a society when people are being killed? Here's just a small excerpt of his sermon. You could go out and find this online. It is very moving. It is very a strong-worded speech. Allow me to read some for you. Never under any circumstances may a human being kill an innocent person apart from war and legitimate self-defense. If you establish and apply the principle that you can kill unproductive fellow human beings, Then woe betide us all when we become old and frail. Woe betide loyal soldiers who return to the homeland seriously disabled, as cripples, as invalids. If it is once accepted that people have the right to kill unproductive fellow humans, and even if it only initially affects the poor, defenseless, mentally ill, then as a matter of principle, murder is permitted for all unproductive people. This rings very true with the people. It renewed protests to the point that Hitler stops the T4 program in August of 1941. It's important to note, though, this is not because of Galen's sermon. It may have played a role, but it is not the main cause. Priorities had shifted to Eastern Europe at this point. By August 1941, Hitler is preparing to launch his invasion into the Soviet Union and take those Soviet-controlled territories that we'll talk about in a little bit. It didn't stop the killing, though. It just changed. So phase 2 meant they used other means, and also got a new code name, 14F13. It will specifically target people in the camps and the prisons that are unable to work, utilizing starvation and lethal injection. So let's do a knowledge check real quick. You're going to analyze this image and consider the following. How does this reflect the material we just covered? And do you think this was effective at convincing people to abandon family members with disabilities? To provide a translation of the image, it says 60,000 RM, which means Reichsmark, this is their currency, is what a hereditary diseased person costs the community over the span of his lifetime. People's Comrade, or the Volksnjos, it's your money too. Take a minute, analyze this with your table partner, and be prepared to discuss with the class. All right. I'm going to explain activity number 1, then we'll end this video and go do the activity. So this is a group activity, and I'm going to move my bubble up to the top corner so you guys can see this a little bit better. In a moment, you'll be broken up into groups representing the following countries: Germany, Great Britain, France, the Soviet Union, the Netherlands, Italy, and Sweden. Make sure you're closely paying attention to what I'm saying when I give directions, because each group has special powers. I'll explain those in a moment here on the video. You will be playing rock, paper, scissors and trying to protect your country or invade. So, some special powers. If you are in the Germany group, you have a commander that is running the show. If you are not the commander, you have to do exactly as you are told. Now, the other countries that are involved, you have some powers. Britain, due to your distance, it takes longer for the Germans to reach your country or any other country. So you have time to prepare a defense or counterattack. France, you do have one of the smallest groups defending you, and you are unable to mount a successful invasion of Germany. Soviet Union, you have the largest group of students and have the possibility of mounting a successful invasion of Germany if you want to. Italy, your rule's kind of limited in this. You have the option to assist Germany in their invasion, but if you decide to not help them invade, you are only allowed to defend your borders and cannot invade other countries. The Netherlands and the Swedes, like the British, you have some distance from Germany, but like France, you have one of the smallest groups of students to defend your country. The goal here is to prevent Germany from invading all of Europe. Good luck. And that's it for video number 1. I'll see you guys in video number 2 in just a minute. Bye, guys.